Appreciate y'all being here. It's good to see everybody in person outside of virtual. I know usually we have a few technical difficulties when we go virtual, so it's good to see you guys in person. Hope everybody's doing well. We want to start out by acknowledging and thanking some people in the building as we prepare for this process. We start out the off season, and we had a goal to add competition to the roster, to add quality men and players into the building. And we believe our pro staff, working along with the coaches and football administration, have done a really good job working to do that. We're obviously not finished. The roster building process is 24/7, 365, so we're continuing to work through that. We'll turn over every stone, yet we appreciate the work that's gone into it up to this point. As Thursday approaches, there's a lot of people that have worked hard to get us prepared for the draft. We feel very confident, excited, and prepared, and we're excited about what we're going to be able to do day 1, 2, and 3, and that's because of a lot of people that have had their hands in it, starting with the college scouting department, who they've grinded through this process for a long time. The coaches, as soon as the season ends, they turn into scouts. We have a very inclusive process, and so they're very involved. They're on the road. They're writing up a lot of players, and they do a lot of work. And so, and also opening their door to scouts and spending time with scouts so we can have a cohesive staff. So we appreciate the coaches. IT, analytics, the video department, the training room, the doctors. A lot of people have put have put a lot of work into this. So I would say we're very thankful and excited as we approach the draft.
And just to follow up on what Terry spoke about, obviously very thankful. We have a very collaborative staff. They've done a tremendous job. We're excited to be a couple days away from the draft. We feel like we've had a really productive spring. So with that, we'll open up questions.
Michael? Yeah, I guess let's start here. How has this been different for you guys this year versus last year? You had, I guess, this new your system in and how you want to see players evaluated in the workplace.
Well, I would say one of the main differences is not being under the COVID restrictions that we had last year. So all the different exposures that we get with the players, having unlimited access at the pro days, being able to go out and do personal workouts, being able to bring players in for the 30 visits, being able to be in person at the combine, being able to look, the local pro day is something we didn't have last year, and there's obviously a lot of homegrown talent here that we're able to see, and so that was exciting. So I would say one of the big parts is just not having all those restrictions that we had last year. And the other part is, hey, we have been together, this entire staff, for over a calendar year, and so the cohesiveness and building those relationships, that's important. And so us being together, living together, really helps in the process as well.
Just for Emily, what do you feel like you need to see in order to draft a quarterback in this class? Like, what do you feel like you need to have seen from these guys?
I don't think it's that simple as look, we evaluate. We spend a lot of time with this quarterback draft class this year. We spent a lot of time with the draft class last year, did a lot of work, and we could, obviously we're not going to give away what we're going to do at 8 or any other pick, but we could come out of this draft with a quarterback. We want to add to that room, and we'll see what happens, but we do a lot of work on this class. We did a lot of work on this class just like we did last year.
And the last thing I got right now is Chris Lindstrom and Caleb Garrett. You guys made decisions on fifth-year options for those guys.
Well, we have until next week, and so we're working through that. But we'll communicate directly with the players and their agents once we make those decisions, and we'll just keep that internal and private for right now.
What makes drafting a quarterback so hard? I went back and looked at, the drafts from '88 on up, when Webster starts in Tampa, and you got Emory, then you guys come in later in '05 and '11. Just drafting a quarterback, it's a lot of smart people have been trying to do it, but what have been some of the things that, from y'all's composite of all the people you mentioned, what is that like trying to, get that quarterback if you decide to go?
Yeah, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, D'Lo, there's a lot of variables that happen. Why guys are successful, why they're not. A lot of it's fit. When you're taking a player, especially taking a quarterback, it really, any portion of the draft to make sure you have a plan. And so, I'm surprised you only went to 88. Thought you'd go earlier. There's some pretty good early '80s classes too, but I'm a little disappointed you didn't go back that far.
there was nobody in the 80s in the building that I know about.
Could be.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hay.
Bob Harrison died, and so was
Okay.
Boy Dollar wasn't here anymore, so I couldn't go out with
Jimmy Hay's the historian, so Jimmy would know.
So, and then to follow that up, what makes it so hard, the history of everyone, does that help you all when y'all have those discussions, that y'all have a deep well of, comparisons and so forth, for comps on quarterbacks from different periods?
Yeah.
It certainly helps. Yeah, you look at why certain players were successful, why they weren't, what you could possibly control. Yeah, I mean, you take it. I don't think you ever dismiss a class year after year. I think you need to understand quarterback talent that's coming into the league. If you don't take one who you potentially would have to see, you have to face off against. So a lot goes into it, but you certainly study history and why guys are successful, why guys aren't.
Thank
Josh, Arthur, when you're evaluating a guy, do you find that your mind drifts more toward what's his floor or what's his ceiling?
Yeah, I think sometimes it probably more the floor. I think anything else you get, you're certainly trying to enhance and develop, but that's certainly where mine goes. It doesn't say it's right or wrong, but that's just how my mind operates.
So how does that impact how you grade, is not probably the wrong word, but sort of place players in this pecking order from your perspective?
It depends what you're looking for at a certain position. Like, what's the job description? What's your vision for the player? How do you think he fits? You try to evaluate all that. So when you put a pick in, you've got a plan for the guy, and you can follow through with it. Like, here's what I know he can do. Here's what you're trying to enhance. Certainly, there's all kind of different skill players, right? There's a lot of guys that have different abilities that can be successful, and depends what you're looking for and who's available when you pick. And when you take that player, do you have the vision? You're going to try to enhance that and play them in the right spot. So certainly, you look at all that stuff.
Terry, is that answer any different for you from your seat? Are you a ceiling or a floor guy at your heart?
No, I'd say it's the same, and I would say usually we want to bring in players that have a high floor because we're focusing on the makeup and bringing in the right human beings. And so usually if you have players that have the right makeup, they're wired the right way, and they're going to work, and they're going to get obviously the coaching here, and they're going to get all the resources here, so they're going to have that high floor because of their makeup and because of their intangibles. And yet, obviously, we want players with high ceilings, but you'd rather it like this. You don't want it to be like this, So I think when we focus on the makeup, then we usually get players that'll have high floors.
Tori?
How has the free agency signings that y'all had over the course of the last couple of months changed the way that maybe you look at some of the position groups of need as you go into the draft?
What it definitely helps. We always want, that's the first part of the process in the offseason, and we want to bring in as much as you can in every phase at every position. And when you add, we always want to take the best players off the board in the draft, but when you're adding to those positions, you're adding competition. I think that helps going into the draft. So that's really important. That's something we prioritize. That helps a lot.
And obviously, going back to Mike's question right off the top, getting guys to be able to be in the building and having those visits, what do you kind of gain from that part of the process that you didn't have last year? Kind of what are you looking for at that point of the process?
Yeah, well, last year everyone was playing under the same rules, and so we had to, and we got everything accomplished that we needed to. But I think it is different when you actually get people in the building and you're able to be around them a lot more as opposed to being on a Zoom. I think there is a difference being in person and spending more time with them. I don't know if I could put one specific thing on it and why it's important, but I think being in person and getting that time up close, I think that's valuable.
Charles, on your left.
The widespread perception is that there's more uncertainty from folks trying to project the first few picks in the draft. Would you agree with that? And if you do, how does that impact your maneuvering and you're trying to get a grasp on your board and what you expect to see in number 8?
I agree. When's the last time we sat here and everyone doesn't know who the first and second pick are? It's unique, especially last year. We were sitting here. We were like the first pick of the draft last year, because especially once San Francisco traded up, we basically knew the first 3 players that were going to come off the board. And now this year, that's not the case, and we're sitting at 8, and so we try our best to anticipate what's going to go in front of us, but we have to be prepared for a lot of different variables and a lot of different scenarios, whether we have to stack the players and be prepared to take them off how we see them, but we also have to be prepared to have those conversations about moving up, about moving down. And so I would say, yes, there's so many more variables, but we just have to be prepared for every scenario.
If I can follow up on that, as part of that difficulty and figuring out what's going to happen, how does that affect any preliminary talks you may have to keep doors open on what calls you may want to receive from folks who might be interested in talking with you before your pick about a possible trade?
I would say we still go through the same process. We're always going to talk to the teams ahead of us and the teams behind us, and we're going to talk to the other 31 teams and communicate. And so we're going to have those conversations anyway, regardless. And same way, we're going to stack the board. So I think it doesn't affect your process. We just have to make sure we're intentional and we know exactly. We go through every single scenario and to determine what we're going to do.
Jeff?
Terry, how did the first year of the rebuild go in your view? And I don't mean in terms of wins and losses. I mean in terms of, as you look back, decisions you made in the draft, how the players developed, did the players turn out to be the guys you thought they were going to be as you look back at the play?
Yeah. So what he wants me to do is repeat his question and say
No, I know.
rebuild. You know, that's what he's doing. He's savvy, right? I got to watch him too. It's not just D-led. Our guy, Jeff.
I think you two just go back and forth and all this transcript.
No, I'm not going to give you that satisfaction. So.
Look, I'll say this. We're trying to add competition at every position and constantly and trying to bring in players that are going to compete. And this is week 2 of the all-season program, and obviously players choose if they want to come or not, and that's their prerogative. But I would say we have a lot of guys out there competing and working to get better, and we appreciate that. We're excited about that. So we saw improvement in areas throughout the year. We'll see improvement throughout this offseason. We're going to keep bringing in competition. That's our charge. That's our goal at every single position, to bring in competition and continue to improve.
I guess I shouldn't ask you if you would change anything or you would do everything the same. Or
We're always looking. We always have a.
I meant from what you already did.
Yeah, we always have an after-action report. We're going to always look at, with a critical eye, look at everything we do, whether we're talking about last year's draft or the way we approach every single decision, every single transaction we make. We're going to look at it with a critical eye, and we're going to always evolve and improve the process. We're focusing more on the process, Jeff, as opposed to focusing on exactly what the result is. We're looking at the process, and we're going to always constantly improve and evolve in every single area. So yes, we look back at last year. We're going to look at the detail of everything we did, every decision we made, and look at ways that we could have improved. I think that's where you have to have humility in these roles, and we both have that, and we both do that.
And you sort of just answered that question a little bit, but for both of you or either one of you, what would you say to fans or mean people in the media who question whether things were done well enough or whether enough progress has been made or what the plan is?
You talking about after year 1 in a draft class?
Yeah, or just
Like the
whatever.
story's already written on some of the players, is that what you're asking? We got a long way to go. We got a lot of guys that are take on bigger roles. I mean, I think it'd be a fool to look back in history after 1 year and say, yeah, I know exactly what this guy's career is going to look like. We got a lot of guys that we feel good about that played different roles. The roles will expand this year. That's part of our job as coaches to develop them. And we still feel pretty good. I don't know if there's a specific player or position you're talking about.
No.
You're just talking about just a general
I was
catch-all?
more Just in general.
Yeah, I think you can continue to evaluate, develop. I think over time, if you made a mistake, you got to be realistic about it. If you need to move on, but we feel pretty good about where our guys are at. A lot of guys that were drafted last year, they're expected to have bigger roles for us this year.
Cam?
For you guys, when you evaluate this draft class, some teams do it differently, but do you guys have like a tier A or amount of elite prospects that you say, hey, there's 4, 5, 6, however many there is? And how does that impact you guys at 8, when you see that number, whatever that number is for you guys?
Yeah, good question. We'll evaluate the class, and we have certain categories that would put players historically in the first round. So, and we're not going to grade on the curve. So we're not going to have 32 first-round picks every year. We might have 20 first-round picks, 18 first-round picks. And so when you're making those decisions, you do look at, okay, this is an impact. We can get an impact player up to this point. So if we discuss a trade back, then we don't want to go below this area, or you're weighing out the pros and the cons of it. So we evaluate the players, put them in certain categories, and that's how we can make decisions to know where you can still get impact players or what area you are in the draft.
If I could follow on that, just kind of learning your evaluation process. There's a lot of talk about this quarterback class maybe not being as high. How do you compare maybe the next quarterback class when you guys do your evaluation to this one, when you decide you're going to pull the trigger on where?
Well, we're going to live in the moment right now. Obviously, we know we have such a good scouting department, so they know players that are in high school that are already coming out, and they know the freshmen and sophomores. And so when we're watching crossover tape, you see the players and you know what's coming up next. But that being said, I think you always have to live in the moment and do what's best for your team. We're thinking big picture, but we're not going to say, hey, we might get this player next year, so we don't want to get this player this year, because there's so much that comes between. And you think about the time, and it's funny when you'll see a mock draft right after this draft for next year. Take one of those and then put it up next to the real draft, and it's comical, So we have an excellent scouting staff that makes us aware of everything that's coming in the future, but we got to live in the moment and do what's best for our team right now.
If I could do one more, sorry, Dave. The edge class.
He worse than our man right here. Multiple questions.
The edge class, what stands out to you when you look at this edge class and some of the players that could be available for you guys?
Yeah, again, without giving anything away, it's a good class. I think throughout, there are players at the top in that elite level. There are players throughout the draft and even down at the bottom. So, and that's such a unique position in that it doesn't have to be one flavor. If you're a pressure player, it can come different ways. And so, but I would say it's a strong class.
Awesome.
Again, in a perfect world, when is your draft board set? And before, the draft starts, do you know who you're going for at number 8?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the question that was posed earlier, that at 8 right now, where last year we had at this time as we're sitting here, we had a pretty good feeling about, or we knew who we were drafting, unless obviously something would happen trade-wise, but now it's completely different. We have our board set, but to know who's going to be there at 8, or if we're going to stay at 8, move up or move down, there are so many variables. I would say right now our board is set, but the hay's never in the barn. We're continuing to work through things all the way up until and throughout the draft. We're constantly working on it. So our board is set. We got the players up where we have them stacked, but we're always gathering information and always working through it.
Mark, all right.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Fontenot. Do you believe there's an NFL starting quarterback in this class?
I think there's starters at every single position, and that's a great question in the way you proposed it, and you could have. I love it, man. It's some savvy, he's experienced, right? But there's starters at every position, and to look at right now we evaluate the players, and of course there's going to be starters that come out of this class. We won't know that until 3-4 years from now with some of the players, but at every position there's starters, there's backups at every position. There's some guys that aren't going to make it at every position.
Will you be disappointed if you don't come out of this draft with a quarterback?
No, we could draft a quarterback in any of the rounds, or there's multiple ways to acquire a quarterback. We want to add to our room, and we will. But so it could be in the draft, it could be after the draft, it could be via trade. We're not going to limit ourselves to any possibility. We're going to turn over every stone. So whether it's in the draft or not, we'll add to that room. Thank you.
Arthur, I wanted to ask you about something we ask Terry about all the time, the best player available philosophy.
Mhm.
Where do you stand on that? And is there ever any push and pull between the guy at the very top and?
I don't know what's happening with this microphone, sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought it was another question.
No,
Is there ever
not
any
at all.
push and pull between the guy who's sitting at the top of the board and someone else who might be at a position of what you guys view as a more immediate need?
I think when you get yourself in trouble, I mean, if things are even, I think your tendency is to go, if you want to say need, but the way, you got to trust the process and the way your board sits. So if it's even, yeah, there's certainly a tendency to go more of a need, but you don't want to sit there and you got to trust your evaluation process, your scouts and everything, all this work put in, and just because of the pressure of the clock, is to overdraft somebody and bring them up, I think you get yourself in trouble. So that's why I think you get best player available. There's always exceptions, but that you try to stay consistent in that regard.
Chris?
Terry, you talked about multiple times about adding to the quarterback room and that you guys are interested in doing that, whether it be through the draft or free agency or however it may be. What other parts of the team, what other rooms do you feel like you need to add to in that way?
Yeah, there's not one room that we don't want to add to, and that's why we have needs in every area of the roster, and even places we might feel better about. We're thinking big picture, so there could be players that won't be under contract in a couple of years or something. So there's not one position that we don't need to add competition to, which makes this process very easy for us because we want to add quality players and human beings into this team and into this locker room, and so we're going to be able to do that. So I wouldn't say there's one position where we'd say, hey, we're all set. We don't need to add a player there.
Yeah, I don't think you're ever all set. Even if you were to win a Super Bowl, I think you're just going to continue to run it back is not a great strategy. So I think the more we can continue to add at every position, increase the competition, improve the roster, I mean, that's what we'll do. I mean, you saw how many transactions we made last year. No different. I think what you're seeing now, there's a lot more avenues and people are more willing to make those trades or however your process goes, but I think that's what you're seeing around the league as well.
And Andrew, I know you come from being an offensive coordinator.
Mhm.
You'll have these meetings leading up to the draft where you discuss players. How do you prioritize that offensive-minded versus?
Well, I think you do what's best for the team, and if you can consider that, I think you'll be in good shape. I'm the head coach first, and I think you know that. And then I spent a couple of years on defense. Sat in enough special teams, you understand that you need to improve your team in all three phases. And you can look at it and sure, we got needs everywhere. You're going to have needs everywhere every year. I mean, you want to continue to improve and enhance and evolve. So I feel good about where we're at, where our process is at right now, and we're excited about this draft coming up.
Josh?
Terry, do y'all have an internal metric for what constitutes a good pick? A first-round pick should give us 50 career starts, and a second-round pick should be a guy who's on the roster in 3 years. Anything like that? Is there a...
So when we talk about the players, the categories that puts a player in the first round, it's going to be an impact player, right? So he's going to be a major impact. And as we go through the draft, okay, there's the solid starters and contributors and developmental. So there are categories in each area. Now, what is an impact player? Is there? We don't have. It's not like we have a certain. He has to.
No numbers associated with that?
Right. These statistics, we evaluate the players, and so as you grade the draft classes 3 years down the road, then you evaluate the players regardless of their statistics or their specific play time. You'll just evaluate the players and what they were. But as we set the board, we have if you fit in this impact category, you fit in the first round, and like I said, we're never going to grade on the curve.
Yeah, it's their impact, Josh, on winning. How many, the impact of winning, what the role is. I mean, you have to vision, just using games played metric. Yeah, if you overdraft somebody, I've seen this happen before. You may say, oh, great, he was a second-round pick. He started 50 games, but he also went through 3 position coaches before he realized the guy couldn't play. So I've seen that too. So it's hard. I mean, that's what makes this sport hard. I mean, there's so many variables you can make an argument for or against. At the end of the day, they have an impact and help this team win.
And to change gears, Arthur, a little bit, when it comes to making the pick, whatever the pick may be down the road this year or next, and you're looking at the quarterback position, is your influence or input, whatever the word is, any different with that position than with other positions?
Sure. I mean, that's the one thing, most important position. Collaborative. Yeah, you're going to be judged on the decisions we make. Yeah. But I mean, if you sit there and there's 30 people saying no, and you're the only one saying, hey, yes, like it's good to have conviction, but Friday night, Saturday, the offseason, to trade 23, obviously you hope to have a long career here, but it won't just be like, hey, this is my guy, like I picked him. I mean, there's a lot of things that always makes me laugh a little bit too, is like you draft a player and said, I found him. Well, what about the thousands of guys the scouts went through, from the training staff to the weight staff, to make sure that you're all on the same page, you have a role for that player. There's a lot to go into it. For just sit there and say, pat myself on the back, say, hey, I'm that transaction for the quarterback, it'll be a collaborative effort.
And it is funny when you see, I don't know how some other I didn't want, and it's just false. And if anyone has been around us at all, they understand the way our process works. We're going through it together. We're on the same page. Are we always going to agree in every moment? Of course not. But we both have humility and have mutual respect that we're going to talk through things, communicate through things. Obviously, the coaches, scouts, we're going to take all the information and find the right player for the Falcons in every process. There hadn't been a decision that we haven't made like that, and there won't be one. So in our process, it is truly an inclusive process, and we're going to be on the same page with every decision we make.
Michael? I got a few more for you. First, when it comes to players who are injured, whether like a Jameson Williams or J.B. Gallo, where you don't know their availability for next season, or even a Drake London, where he wasn't able to do everything in the pre-draft process. How does that affect what you might do, whether it's 8 or 43, or wherever you end up picking with those particular players?
Yeah, it's a weighing process. We actually had our second medical meeting yesterday afternoon, and we went through every prospect and where they are in their rehab, and there's different ones. There are some players that you're not going to see work out. Some players are able to see work out, and we really lean on our doctors and our training staff to tell us, okay, this is where the player is now. This is the expectation based off where they are in their rehab, and we expect a full recovery at this point. And so we lean on them a lot in that process, and it's basically weighing, okay, this player might be a red shirt, or this player is PUP, or and we weigh the player's talent compared to what we're going to get on the back end and how long he's going to be out for. So it's really leaning on, we're not doctors, we're not experts in that area, but we lean on I guess you might, did you read a book about being a doctor? You think you're So, but we really lean on them in that process, and we weigh it out, the player, the talent level of the player, and the medical, what we expect on the other end of it.
So that wouldn't necessarily dissuade you from taking
No.
at 8 or 43.
Not at all.
You mentioned before first-round evaluations. So how many first-round evaluations do you have this year?
I won't give you the exact number.
He's looking for the headline, Terry.
It's not, yeah. He's looking for.
You said that it's not necessarily 32. You okay, out there somewhere.
He wants one of us to say something he can put on PFT, one of the, Michael Rothstein's. But they're going to give you the,
No, look at the credit.
So, yeah, I won't tell you the first round, but usually there's rarely 32 first round picks. So you always know at what point are you not going to get what you deem a first round pick talent. But there's never, usually not 32.
And the last thing I have is with Grady Jarrett, where do things stand in terms of, I guess, negotiations with him, or whether you think you'll get something done with him from a long-term perspective or not?
Well, we'll keep that private, all those communications between us and Todd and Grady, and we'll keep those private and direct with them and keep that in-house. But we've been clear with how we feel about Grady and the person, the player, all those things. Love Grady, but we'll keep that in-house.
Cam? With the influx of receiver trades this offseason and contracts, has that changed how you evaluate that position and the positional value of that position?
It's a good question. It's a really good question, because when you're looking at what different positions and when you stack the value of positions and you look at how much they cost, all those things, they all mean something. And that being said, I would say for us, when we're valuing, when we don't want to know what positions are important, it's more so what's important to author and the offensive staff, and in that way, and what's important for our team in the way you value it. But you always have to think about those things, those numbers, at all the what people get paid and All those things are important, but I would say we lean more towards what's important to us in this building.
Gotcha. If I can follow on that, I'll start with you, Art. Is there like 2 or 3 qualities that you would look for, like as a general, like at the quarterback position? When you start to evaluate, are there 2 or 3 things you start to first look at?
Well, I think there's a lot of different variables, and the one thing I think you can't be too critical on, I mean, people play offense a lot of different ways, right? That's the talent pool coming through, and then so, you know, certainly you want to evaluate the decision-making, and obviously accuracy is a big part, and then you evaluate the arm strength and how he fits and what you could do with him. So, you know, obviously decision-making, accuracy is a big part of it. You know, those are hard things to fix. And the rest of it, you know, you see what's the best fit, what he's doing, and what's he's being asked to do. I think that's one thing that gets overlooked. I think it's easy just to criticize a guy. Well, I don't see him throw these routes. Well, they may never ask him to do that, but does he have a pocket feel? Is he a good decision maker? And is he accurate? I think you go from there, then you evaluate the arm strength, and there's a lot of other factors, but that's kind of where you start.
Jeff? For either of you, it's well known how much money's coming off the books after next year. How important is it is there any way to quantify how important it is for the roster, the franchise to be at a certain point by the end of the next season so that you could go into free agency and sort of make those 1 or 2 moves or whatever to get to that next level? That'd be
Yeah.
the simplest way to figure out how to
Yeah.
answer the question without being judged too much by the head coach.
Come on. You're supposed to be here to judge me. I'm not supposed to judge you, right?
You want to start? Explain it a little more.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
trying to
you're
see
asking if we were like-
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, as it's been said many times, I mean, for a couple of years, you guys are hamstrung in terms of what you could do in free agency. And
Sure.
So obviously, it's really important to get the moves you make to get right as you veer toward being a contender, or whatever word you want to use.
Yep.
So once we get through this period here, as you enter free agency next year, is there any way to, again, sort of say we really need to be at this point by the end of this upcoming season? I'm not in terms,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about in terms of wins and losses. I'm talking about in terms of roster and having pieces to build on moving forward. Is there any way you guys have any sort of vision or whatever in your mind? Because obviously you're not going to go out next summer and buy 7 players, but
Right.
But in terms of how many pieces you sort of need in place or where you need to be in the building process.
Yeah, and I would say we have a plan, and we're working to execute that plan. And regardless of the dead money this year and all those things, we're excited about the players that are in this building right now, and we need to go in this draft and add pieces and add. Again, we have 5 picks over Thursday and Friday, and then 9 total picks, and so we got to hit on those players. Even after the draft, there's a bigger pool with COVID and the way everything happens. So there's a bigger pool here. So there's going to be some players that we sign after the draft that would have been drafted in another year. And I have confidence in our scouting staff and our coaches in developing those players that we're going to be able to bring in a lot of impact players, a lot of good players this year. Even the players that we sign, regardless regardless how much we spend on players, we have confidence in our scouts and our coaches. So we see that even despite the challenges we had this year, Jeff, we're going to like where we are as a team as we step into the year, and we're going to continue to improve. And there's never going to be a time that we have a lot of money, we're going to go out and be reckless. And we're still going to have a process and have discipline and do things the right way. So it's tough I feel like we want to have a smart, tough, competitive team, and we want to continue to improve every day. And that's how I think that's how I would judge it with the way we're competing and what we have in the building.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry. Nothing to add.
Terry just answered it.
And one more question. Would it surprise you, given how hungry teams in general are for quarterbacks, if the quarterback wasn't drafted in the first 15 picks, say, this year?
Man, this draft is. I'm having trouble predicting it, Jeff. It really is tough to anticipate the draft. right now what's going to happen in the first 10 picks or the first 15 picks. So it's tough, man. If you know, you tell me. And it's funny, my phone is, I got a million calls because everyone wants to talk through the draft and wants to gather information, but I don't have the answers right now. That's why we got to be so prepared for a lot of different variables. So it's tough. It really is difficult to predict. This is a very unique draft.
Anybody else? Chris?
Are y'all wearing the same watch?
We are.
Is that like
Can you tell a story about the watch?
No,
Is that weird? I'm not gonna.
it's a Terry got a sponsorship.
You can't say that.
Maybe they send an extra one. Maybe. We'll show it to you afterwards. See if we can get Terry to send us some more watches.
There you go.
y'all two got it, or did other people in the
Again, we'll keep
Trying
those
to
in
get
house.
stories, see?
Keep those in house.
Keep it in house.
We'll keep it. Well, no, we're just
Keep that private.
Yeah, keep it private. We don't want to offend anybody, and Terry didn't.
Well, you already
hand out-
threw out the
Terry
sponsorship.
didn't
That's
hand
not
out
good.
the watches that were sent
Tim
to
Z's
everybody.
going to give you a call about the sponsorship.
Well, I didn't say who it was, so I'm not getting myself in trouble. But there was a select few that Terry handed him out to.
Oh, goodness. Here we go. Here we go.
I didn't get one, so we can wrap it up.
What's the war room look like for you guys? We know without all these protocols and things like that, where are you going to be based for you guys?
I actually liked it's funny because a couple years ago when you had the COVID draft and it was really efficient, and I remember sitting in my living room and I had the little ones tugging on me, and it was very efficient and it worked. Last year we had a smaller, not as many people in the draft room, and it was outstanding. I think there's too many chairs and tables in our draft room right now. I would say that. So I liked it when it was not as many people.
I actually did have one more question for you now. In terms of when you're building this out, how much do you weigh young, like draft picks and trying to hit on draft picks versus supplementing with free agents? Because different people do it different ways. Like, how do you philosophize that over the next 2-3 years?
Well, I think the easiest thing, we've got a lot of draft picks this year, and you'd like to hit on the majority of those. I mean, you got younger players that are probably on more team-friendly deals, especially with the current cap situation. So in the short term, and I think every year you don't want to dismiss it. I know that's kind of depending on where teams are at, they're just living through free agency. I think you get to the point where you can definitely supplement free agency, but you've hit on enough draft picks that you keep replenishing, and you got guys you're developing. So if you do lose a guy that makes a lot of money in his free agency, you got another guy, and so I think you could have a good balance. But where we're at currently is from last year to this year, and where our cap issue is like those draft picks, whether some of them are ready or not, they're going to have to play. We saw that last year with some of them. We had a plan, and injuries come up, and you got to play a guy earlier, or you're able to be disciplined in certain spots, maybe on the back end. But so where we're at current for 22, I mean, this draft's obviously big for us.
I meant just more macro, like when you're looking at 23, 24.
Sure. Yeah, but I think if you have a good balance, and then again, there's always a great unknown in free agency. When you go out there and you obviously you got to fill the cap space, but you'd like to be able to re-sign some of your own players, and then supplement it where you're not just relying on one big free agency dump. That help?
Yeah.
Cool.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to the
Sure.
follow-up? That was the answer you just gave about, a lot of rookies played last year, young guys played last year, normal circumstances wouldn't be playing this much.
Sure.
Is that why it's unfair to sort of judge?
I think so. I mean, I've seen it. You've seen it both ways. Guys have had success year one, and maybe they get comfortable and their habits change, or they get content. And I think that's the hardest thing is for guys, the rare ones that stay motivated and they continue to do it year after year after year. And then I've seen it the other ways. Guys may struggle, come from a completely foreign system. You believe in the player. Hey, we're bringing you along, and then they really take off year 2, year 3. But some of them, when we had a plan, maybe not to play them as early as we had to, well, somebody had to play, right? So that's why it's hard to say, hey, this is where we're going to be in a year, Jeff, so you can use Terry's words against them. We're not going to give you that satisfaction, but there's a lot of variables that happen, and that's why not being evasive, but it's not fair to some of these players after year one to say that this guy's riding off and they're already getting his bus ready in Canton, or this guy can't play. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
All right.
Anything else?
Can I ask Charles to Arthur, about running backs and particularly, especially about Cordarrelle. He was obviously a revelation last year, but do you anticipate any tweaks to the dual role this year?
D-Led's got him at wide receiver, so
Is that where he's got him on his depth chart?
D-Led's got him at wide receiver, so I didn't know. That's news to me. We just hopefully expand on it, and we have to see. I mean, again, we feel good, and we have a running back that's a rookie that's going to be, we feel good about going into the season. His role may evolve back on the perimeter. It just depends. You may have weeks where we got to play him, give him more carries. We obviously like the football player. We appreciate what CP did for us last year and what he's going to do for us in the future. But that's what's fun about coaching a guy like CP, because you can move him around a lot of different spots. You still got him at wide receiver? Is that what you're going to go with?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay right there.
All right, interesting.
Maybe, Sunday night, we might switch back.
We'll see.
We'll see, yeah.
You still got the safeties wrong. Not to say I'm auditing you or anything, but
It's unofficial.
it's what hedge your bet.
April.
All right, anything else?
Good.
That's good to know.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Go
guys.
back into the lab.